We now open questions to the floor, and of course you're welcome to pose your questions directly to our speakers, or feel free to jot them down and then pass them on to the stage. Maybe I'll get this started by posing a question to both of you, going back to the music and film industry. One thing about the music industry, I think Hong Kong is not alone in that the music industry, global music industry, is still struggling with how to adjust to this new business model of streaming as opposed to CD sales. So I guess Hong Kong is not unique in that case, and hopefully everyone will start figuring out how best to make a living out of this.
Yeah, because I think for pop music, language is one very major issue, so our market is kind of small, so we'll think of ways, but we always believe that we do need local music, we need to make local music for local people. So, yeah,
and
we're
although
trying hard.
Cantonese-speaking population is still substantial overseas as well. But let me ask this question for both of you. Where do you stand on this debate between the greater integration with the Chinese mainland industry? Because obviously not just Hong Kong, but the rest of the world think that is the market, upcoming market. So where do you stand on the debate between greater integration with the mainland industry as opposed to just focusing and nurturing local production? Nansun?
I just want to add on to what you said just now about Cantonese songs and making Cantonese music for the local people. During those, when I mentioned just now the 10 golden years, not just film was doing well. A lot of related industry like music was also doing well. And great big singers from Taiwan would not consider themselves successful unless they were successful in Hong Kong. And actually all the Cantonese songs, at the time karaoke was very popular in China. And I've gone to some really backward places in China, and they all knew how to sing Cantonese songs. So when you're doing good, it's not just for the local market. I mean, I see these really very, remote part of China. You go to the karaoke and they're all singing, Shanghai Tan, for instance, right? So I just want to correct that. I think there's no such thing as a debate between the integration and less integration. Like I was saying just now with the filmmakers. Some have decided that they have the ability to tell stories which will appeal to the China audience. So some directors decide they want to go to China. So that is, fair enough. And then other Hong Kong filmmakers decide they would stay in Hong Kong and make Hong Kong films. I think that's very healthy to have, it's just like in the States, well, of course not these superhero movies, but it's nice to have local, regional, films which reflect a different culture to the mainstream. So in China, you would have movies from Yunnan also, which would reflect the cultural aspects of that particular place. So I think Hong Kong would be like that. We would have films which truly represent a very Hong Kong lifestyle, value systems here, which would be different. It may not appeal to all of China, but it doesn't matter.
So a mix of both is good. Yeah. Mark, what are your thoughts?
I totally agree. When the China market opened, film or also make music, we were like looking, that's a big market. We try to do something what the mainland Chinese people like, and we were trying very hard, but we couldn't actually because we're from Hong Kong. Our cultural background is different, but I'm sure we can produce things that is totally Hong Kong, but appreciated by mainland, appreciated by the world. So I think we need to have our own taste in things, and we should be proud of what Hong Kong can produce. But we do have to think of how to market our product properly to other regions in the world.
Now we have a question here from the British chapter. What does Hong Kong need to do to support the development of the Hong Kong film and music industries and the creative industries more widely?
What does Hong Kong do to support the creative industry?
Yeah, what can Hong Kong do to support the development?
I think generally I'm not saying we should rely solely on the government, But the creative industries in the world, in developed economies, has been very competitive in the last 10 years because it's one of the biggest growth industries. And I think more and more governments are aware of the soft power of the cultural industries, how films, music can affect people in ways which other more obvious ways cannot. I think so. That's why I think first the government, our government, has to be determined to identify the creative industries as a major area to develop. Then everything else follows. I was quite instrumental, I think, from the 80s to try and get the government to start some kind of agency to help films. Not only because I'm a filmmaker, because I remember every time the government, before the 80s, if the government had a mission to go to Korea or Europe, they would ask for the Chinese folk dancers and what have you. And then in the 80s, they always started asking us for films. They wanted the films and the actors and actresses from the films to go on these missions. So I realized how influential this could be and what it can do for Hong Kong. So in the 80s, we started lobbying the government to kind of create an agency. So now it's what? We have now got a Film Development Council, but I am sorry to say I served on the council for the first 7 years, but I'm sorry to say that I don't think it's very effective because it's still, there are all kinds of problems with it, which you can well imagine a government agency can be. I think first the government is determined to say we want to promote these industries. And I think it is these creative industries like music, design, and film also are really worthwhile because we have a strong DNA in this area. We already have the infrastructure and the talent and what have you. So it is something, that Hong Kong, if you say, what can Hong Kong do? We have financial services, tourism. This is definitely one area that we can totally go into and have the ability to do it. We've done it before, so we can, do it again.
Just to follow up this, there's another question saying, do you think the traditional culture within families encourages parents for their children to look into creative industries? Because as we know, it's usually the more traditional medicine. Do you think the culture at the moment is such that it encourages people to explore their creative side and to go into those lines of work?
I think people pay lip service and they say, oh yes, good, but they still want them to become doctors and engineers. But for instance, we are the best examples. Here is a civil engineer who has done so well in music. Sure. I was trained in statistics and computer science, so here we are. We get our degrees first so that our parents are happy.
Yeah, keep them happy first.
Something else.
Exactly. Mark, there's a question for you here. Impressive career and work. Do you ever sleep, or how do you balance your time between?
Oh, it's very simple. I don't sleep. Honestly, yeah. Every day, 3 to 4 hours. I also have my sons to take care. I like to spend time with my son. And I just got 2 dogs. And I like to play with them too. I don't sleep.
Yeah.
But all these stuff. And I'm a very responsible person. So when I have a chance to work for whatever nature, I put my best, in it, and that keeps me really happy, to be able to work, to have a chance to work, to create. Yeah.
We just have a few minutes left, but Nansun, I really wanted to ask you. There are not very many women in the film industry. How has it been difficult breaking into the Asian, in particular, the Asian movie business?
Actually, there are a lot of women working in the film industry, more in the behind the scene, especially in producers' unit. They are wardrobe, makeup. They are. I don't think there's been any barrier. I think actually, if you go into the more traditional industries like banking or that sort of traditional, I think because it's so traditional, it's maybe has more obstacles. But film industry is a very kind of free, very open-minded people usually. So I've never had any problem, being a woman or a man or whatever, or straight or gay or whatever. It's very free. It's a very free, open-minded industry.
Well, Nansun, you've certainly been a role model for other women, budding producers out there in Hong Kong. Thank you so much. That concludes our Luncheon Dialogue. And big thanks to our speakers, Mark Loy and Nansun Shi, for being with us today.